All right. Today I'm going to talk about the sermon title with Friar of Haran. Friar, does anybody know what this is, Friar? Yeah, it's a new word actually. I asked even Lydia and it was a new word. It's basically a term that describes a monk, Christian monk or the Catholic monks who dedicate their life to serve God in a particular way. They stay in a fellowship or a special housing and devote their life in labor and devotion to the dedication of their life to study Bible. And they kind of walk away from your home worldly life, only pursue after God. So that's the term that describes those group of people. Pilgrim, we talked about it, is similar kind of, but it is a little bit old group of people. The reason I said that is we are continuing to speak about Jacob. Even though Jacob never been a friar, I mean, he lived his ordinary life as like all of us. But the reason that I kind of use this word is that because I feel even though we live in the world and we are pursue after the ordinary, typical worldly things, and we overcome and we fight, we endure, persevere in doing all these things. In a way, God is with us, and God has put us in this life to endure and persevere. And so in a way, maybe the friars, they kind of separate them from the world, and they're in this special segregated areas to protect themselves from the world and then pursue after God. But we are in the world, yet we pursue after God. Just like in Asia, your prayer request, you want God to be your priority. It takes a lot of strength and energy and courage because we are in the world. So in a way, I'm thinking the work we take in this life is same thing as friars, dedicated in their life pattern. And so that's why I use that term. You know, when we try to aging these pickles and this food, what does aging take when you're trying to pickle them? Why do we say aging? It takes time. It takes time and it takes a lot of patience out of the chef who's preparing. I tried a couple of times. Pickle I tried, tomato I tried. Did I try this? So the problem with this is like you make it and then you want to eat it right away. But thing is, aging takes time and it takes perseverance. In life, I think that's aging process. It seems like God is leading us into troubles, leading us into the hardship. Maybe I should rephrase this. Maybe God is not leading us into the trouble, but God is refraining His hand, tie His own hand in the bag, so that He will not interfere with what we do. What I'm saying is, we are the one caused it, whatever hardship, the trouble, and we live the consequences. But what God has been doing is helping us along the way. But now, sometimes God refrained Himself. His two hands are tied in the back and only watches over. And let you and I go through this life that we have made, that we have caused. You know, Jacob, he ran away from his own brother Esau, right? It's because he's the one decided to steal his first son right by deceiving Esau and his father, right? That was last week's sermon. And he ran away because he was fearful of what Esau might do to him. And matter of fact, Esau talked to himself, said that I'm going to kill him once my father passes away. He didn't want to do it while his parents is alive, but he wanted to do it after. And his parents knew that, so that's the reason Jacob was asked to leave home and go to Haran. And last we said he encountered God at Bethel, right? That's where he encountered God. There he found his true identity, that he is not a stranger in this life, but he is the pilgrim who's supposed to pursue after the truth of God. And finally he arrived. He arrived at the Haran, but at this place, greater trouble was waiting for him. It was more conflict than he had with his brother at home. Here, the greater conflict was waiting. I mean, can you feel that pain? You run away from your own small, tiny conflicts and your troubles and crises, and you thought yourself that you found the secure fortress. But there is a little bit, like we can describe it like it's almost like a rattlesnake hole, where more troubles and more crises there. And that's exactly what happened to the life of Jacob when he went to Haran. And that's why I use the word aging as a key word to describe his life. I ask myself, why would God do this to him? Why would God not helping him, right? It's because the aging process is the way that improves the taste of the food. I think the way that we're going through the troubles and the hardship, what happened to our character, will become more like human, as God has intended. We matures. It's for the maturity of ourselves. That is why they use key. Let's take turn read these verses. Actually, let's just read all together since we have you here. Okay, let's start. It was like this for the 20 years I was in your household. I worked for you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wage 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hand, and last night he rebuked you. Laban answered Jacob, the women are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine, or about the children they have borne? Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. He said to his relative, get some stones. So they took stone and piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Zegar Shahadata, and Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. That is why it was called Gilead. And it was all called Mizpah, because he said, may the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. Amen. So, we know Jacob, the runaway fugitive, he met God at the place called Bethel, house of God. There he found his own identity. Now he arrived at Haran, but actually he did not come into the village yet. He was still in the wilderness. He reached to a well, you know, that well, that famous well in the Bible. There he met Rachel, the Laban's daughter, which is his uncle's daughter, basically. And they fell in love at the first sight. They fell in love. Rachel, joyfully ran into her house and then get his father Laban, and then they welcomed Jacob into their household. So Jacob stayed there about a month, helping their chores and all that. And one day, Laban, his uncle called him, saying, Jacob, you're my nephew, but I still like to pay you the wages as much as you are serving me. Well, Jacob thought that was an opportunity for him. So he said, well, uncle, I'd like to marry your daughter Rachel, right? But I have nothing. So I will serve you for 7 years instead. Laban thought to himself, I mean, there's nothing for him to lose. I mean, it's a family relative who is the rightful partner for his daughters to marry. So, and now he has a free 7-year servant who will work for him. So he said yes. So finally, they decided, and then they start having the marriage wedding going on. Typically, they have 7-day wedding festival. First wedding day, of course, there's wine and food and dance and singing and all the parties going on, right? And late night, the time came. So when they walk into their own tent, right? Jacob and Rachel should walk into the tent, and they have first night. What surprise was waiting for Jacob? In the morning, he wake up. He realized in his tent, it wasn't the Rachel, but it was Leah. It was Rachel's older sister. How is this possible? I don't know. Jacob must have had a lot of drink before the night. And he could not tell the difference. But what happened was actually it was uncle's plan, Laban's plan. It's Rachel's dad's plan. Leah, she had weak eyes. Almost to the point of blind, I'm thinking. And in those days, because they don't have this technology, someone who's blind is heavily handicapped. And that's how it's perceived by people. And so Leah had no chance of marrying any other man. So as a father, he decided to send her first before the younger sister, Rachel. And father forced her to go into the tent instead of Rachel. And that's what happened. And Jacob, he found out this in the morning. I mean, he was furious, right? Because he was in love with Rachel. But Laban said, you know what? In our cultures, in our tradition, we don't marry younger daughter before the older one. We don't allow that. It's not like us, We don't do that. That was his excuse. Well, of course, Jacob, when he heard it, he was still angry, right? Because he still was in love with Rachel only. And so Laban, he made a plan. He said, okay, I'll give youngest Rachel to you too. But you need to work for me 7 more years. So now, Laban, his uncle, ended up giving away his 2 daughters, basically sell off to the 14 years of free labor by Jacob, and then actually all his daughters. That's what happened. Jacob, who was in love with Rachel, had no choice but to say, okay. And that's how his hardship and trouble began in this place called Haran. There's 3 relationship struggles that is very evident in this part of the story. The first relationship I see is Jacob is those people who had to share his tent. Okay. Jacob was in love with who? Rachel. But now he has 2 wives though. So naturally what would happen? Jacob would only care for Rachel, but Leah is there as just a wife. So if you're Leah, what would you feel? You're very sad, unhappy, because Jacob may approach you, but no love. No love. But Rachel, she was happy because her husband loved her. But funny things happening here, very interesting things happening here. Jacob was in love with Rachel, and Jacob was always with Rachel. But you know what? Guess what? Who was with Leah? God was with Leah. God took Leah's side. God gave Leah all the children of Jacob. Every time Jacob walked into Leah's tent, she bore his children. Reuben, Simon, Levi, and Judah. She had 4 children out of Jacob. While this was happening, Rachel had the love of Jacob, but she had no children. So now what's happened to Rachel? Is she happy? No, she is also unhappy woman. And every time Leah's children grow up and running around, she is burning with jealousy. Jealousy. So he comes to Jacob saying, Jacob, I want to have children out of you. And Jacob said, I'm no God. and Rachel's, she was still angry, and finally she forced Jacob to take her servant maid, Bilhah. Forced Jacob to sleep with her own servant maid, Bilhah. And Jacob had no choice, seems like. Or at least it seems that way. He slept with Bilhah and 2 kids out of her. And Rachel, of course, just looking at that, she's just satisfied. Now, this became a competition between Leah and Rachel. Leah, now her womb is closed. No more children. And watching Rachel did this to Jacob, she's now, jealousy is burning in her heart. She said, what is Rachel doing? So she decided to give her own servant maid, Silva, to Jacob. Now she forced Jacob to sleep with her, and then Silva also had two sons. This is kind of what is going on. Can you imagine what is Jacob going through in this? In his tent right now with all these people, Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, and Zilpah. Like in this modern day, we have one husband, one wife, one partner, right? And most of us, we struggle dealing with 4 different techniques. What a struggle Jacob must have had and experienced. Struggled. Wives, they were competing each other, and then they continued to have babies, and just this is going on. And I was kind of looking at this, what's going on here? What's going on? Why is Jacob so powerless or boneless, it seems like? Because every time his wife tells him what to do, he listens. Like, 것을 보덜. Jacob just, why is this happening? Well, I think this is what's happening. As he was watching over what Leah and Rachel was doing, conflicting and fighting, he was looking at himself. In the past, what did he do? He fought with his older brother Esau. And matter of fact, the whole reason for him to be here at Haran, Laban's place, is because of that conflict, that mistake that he had. The mistake that he had with his brother, his own brother. And that is the reason he ran away. Now he is here, ironically, now he's witnessing and watching over his own wives, who is sisters, siblings, and they're fighting over him. You see, what's going through in his mind is reflecting his own images, his own mistake, and maybe there's a repentance. There's a reflection of what he did wrong in the past. In the Bible story, nothing is explained because this is just narrative, it's a story, it's a drama. You as a leader and reader of this Bible story, I as a Bible reader, we need to be the ones to translate and understand this drama. As Jacob was going through this witnessing, and aimlessly, if you look at it, like how he's listening to his wife, and it is in a way, it's a repentant period for him, watching over in this relationship. And that is why I believe the aging process is so much important for us to understand in life. We may feel like we want to be somewhere right then, but we can't. It takes time. It takes perseverance. It takes that step. And for Jacob, he has to go through and see himself what he did wrong. You see, and I think that was what was going on here. The second relationship that we see here is a business partner relationship. It's kind of funny that I look at his relationship to Laban, the Rachel's and Leah's father. I believe it is a business partner relationship. It never is a family relationship because the uncle never really approached him with the family. He was from there, day one, he was there to take advantage of Jacob. And that's what he did. He continued to lie. Actually, he said he lied like 10 times in 6 years. 6 years. I mean, first thing is he switched Jacob's wife. I mean, can you imagine that? Who would do that? And that's the kind of relationship that he was in. Can you imagine Jacob, who is very sly and smart, right? He's the one deceived his own brother and bought his firstborn, right? And could not read what is Laban trying to do. From the day when he saw it, and last 20 years after that, he lived there for 20 years. And all these years, how could he stand what his father-in-law did, actually, what his uncle did to him? What would it take for you to endure that, persevere that? If your business partner is doing this to you, constantly lying to you and take advantage of you, what would you do? Well, I mean, typically you walk away, right? You serve the contract and then you walk away. You free yourself, right? Well, actually, because of that reason, actually, Jacob decided to live Haran. 20 years later, though. But he was thought him to self. He was keep saying to himself that he wanted to live this place, but he couldn't make a decision. He was so much struggle. But what helped them to make the decision to leave the place? It was God who came and told them, it's time. Now go back to your home. God came and told them that. Even though he was struggling deep inside, he wanted to live and he wanted to free himself. He couldn't do it. He couldn't make the decision. And maybe he was waiting for his mom's message. Right? Remember when mom, say goodbye to him, say, I will send the message when Esau is cooled down. But that message never came, apparently. But it was actually God who intervened in the middle and told them it's time. 20 years was enough for him to aging himself. He became matured as much. He endured enough of lies of Laban. He decided to call his wife, who was in the field working, and explain to them, saying, God told me to live this place. But you also know that what your father did to me. And this is the first time, actually, Jacob explained all the wrong thing Laban has done against him. And I thought to myself, did ever Jacob share this trouble and this struggle in himself with his wife last, 6 years and 13 years? Because 7 years, 6 years, that's 13 years. For 7 years, that wasn't a relationship with wife. So did he do that? My conclusion? Probably Jacob never did share his struggle with their parents, their father. Because if I was him, because I would be feared to lose even the supports of his own wife. And so it was then when God told him to live, that was the first time he was opening all this, what Laban, their father had done to Jacob. And like 10 times he changed the way. He's been lying constantly. And of course, the daughters of Laban clearly understood what Jacob went through, and then this is what they said to Jacob. It's kind of funny because even the daughters, they felt they were cheated by their own father. So does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. This is the daughter speaking when Jacob explained all that. So they decide to leave Haran without notifying Laban. So they walked away with everything they own. And at the time, actually, Laban was out in the field, taking care of the sheep. And 3 days later, he heard about it. That Jacob and then all his daughters ran away with the flocks and sheep and everything. So he chased them for 7 days, and they arrived the mountain Gilead. And he tented there overnight because he did not reach to the tent of Jacob yet. That overnight, when he tented there, he had a dream, and there in the dream, guess who came? God came to Laban. And then warned him not to do anything against Jacob. But anyway, he came to the tent of Jacob the next day, right? He was furious, right? So this is what he said. I have all the power to harm you, Jacob. This is Laban saying, I have all the power to harm you. The women are my daughters. The children are my children. He's talking about actually Jacob's children here. Okay? The flocks are my flocks. This is Jacob's flock he's talking about. All you see, this is everything Jacob brought out, is mine. This is Laban. He thought to himself, everything Jacob and his daughters owned and had and possessed, it was actually his. That's the kind of greedy man he was. He never had a decent minds to give away anything to Jacob and his daughters. But because he was fearful of what God told him, he told Jacob that let's make a covenant between us. And so they make the covenant together with a stone and the heap of stones. They make the covenant. And the covenant was that they never cross this heap of stone, to attack each other. So Jacob said, no, I'm not going to cross this boundary anymore. They're not going to cross this boundary. That way they will be separated, protected. Because Laban was fearful of Jacob's strength. And he may come back and then, revenge of what he did to him. So this marks the end of 20 years of journey of Jacob, who stayed in Haran. Now, he struggled with his wives. He struggled with his business partner. But that wasn't the only thing. One of the reasons actually that Jacob was keep thinking about to leave Haran was because he overheard what the children of Laban was saying. Every day, daily chore of shepherd is to go out in the field tendering the sheep. As Jacob was doing that, he was out there in the field with who? Sons of Laban. His brothers, literally brothers, right? They're out there in the field. It's every day. So the field is actually his job. It's a job place, workplace. Can you imagine Jacob is there with children of Laban and then that is workplace? But one day he overheard this statement. This is what made Jacob to really consider about living here. Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all this wealth from what belongs to our father. Children of Laban were saying that everything Jacob had, it belongs to their father. And as a matter of fact, actually, they thought Jacob was a thief, stealing all the possession of their parents. Can you imagine? This is what they're saying while Jacob is out in the field with them by himself. And the children of Laban were saying this. Can you imagine that you go to a workplace like this? They're gossiping about you, saying he's a thief. What would you feel like? I mean, probably you won't even stand there for like about a month. So like, I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna quit. Most of us will probably quit the job and then looking for a different place to work. But can you imagine that Jacob still had to endure this kind of setting? This is the kind of, and that's the reason he wanted to live that place. And most of us, we struggle at workplace. Doesn't matter you have a part-time job or not. You struggle. You struggle with your boss, your manager, and coworker. I mean, there's always that. And I know more than probably 70% of the employees, they quit and change their job because it's not because of their wage. Yeah. Most of the time it is because of the conflict with your company, your co-workers. But Jacob endured all of that too. I mean, can you imagine every side, his relationship, there's a hardship. Nothing is easy. I mean, in a way, if you're looking at Jacob's relationship, it's like one huge picture of everything could go wrong in anybody's life. Huh? Typically, one person have a little bit of trouble with the wife, maybe. Maybe one person has a little bit of trouble with the partner in business. And one trouble with the employee. But not every aspect of it. It's like there's no place for him to go. Can you imagine you live in that setting? Then why or how Jacob was able to endure this long? What made him to endure this long? You maybe say, well, 20 years, that's nothing. But 20 years is a long time. I quit my job after 18 years in one company. That was long too. That was long too. That was my one and only job out of college. And it was still long. I moved several places, different departments because of a different issue with the boss and this, that. But it was still long. Can you imagine Jacob's life? He came into the Haran at 77 years old. Now he's at 97. He's living. What made him to do this, endure this long? Well, we need to listen to what he said to Laban. This is what he said. Somehow I don't see the passage right away. Here. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac has not been with me. So he explains everything to what Laban had done to him. And then he said, if the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, then you would make me live this place empty-handed. Then, when you think about your own life, our own life, you see, what we need to hear is that for Jacob, for him to endure this long was because he knew grace of God was still with him. It was God's strength that made him to stand and endure. And each day he can go to work and have still a relationship with his wives and live this life having children. he was able to go on each day because he knew God was with him. God was with him. And he knew that, exactly that. And that's why he's telling Laban, if it wasn't my God, you'd be more worse than what you did, what you have been. Well, he's saying, I couldn't live without God. It was because of God I came this far. I look at to my own life, and maybe there was ups and downs, right? In every life that we live, we have ups and downs. There's some days you're very happy, some days you're very unhappy. There's sometimes more trouble, sometimes just no trouble. But it is always ups and downs. It is a path that brings the accident, troubles, and mistakes and hardships. Whatever. It always comes at you. And we need to deal with that. That's life. Well, we have strengths to overcome with our own strength sometimes. And sometimes we can handle it, because we can endure it. But too often, the things that comes to us, it's bigger than our own strength. It's bigger than what we can handle. And for Jacob, that was what it was, his life. It was much bigger than what he can handle. He couldn't stand being a second son, can you imagine that? He couldn't stand being a second son, but he ended up in this life, what he lived in Haran. Can you imagine struggles going through in his heart? But he still endured because he knew that God was still with him. And it was God who will give him the strength. So for us, as we are wrapping up this part of the message, one thing we need to remember is that the pains and suffering we experience in our relationship with those we live with, those we do business with, and those we accompany with are ripening agent. I don't know if this is a proper way of saying it in English, but it's a ripening agent. It's like it's agent that helps you mature in God, in trusting God. We cannot do it our own self. If we don't have the troubles and hardship and struggles, somehow we won't mature. We'll remain infant in Christ. We will just like to live this way as it is. But because we go through hardship, because we have a trouble in relationship with our spouses, because we have a relationship with our partner in business, because we have a relationship problem in workplaces, we become more stronger and we become mature. And it's all part of God's plan. That is the reason God did not help Jacob, or did not help stopping him entering into Haran. He was running away from something that is a small problem, but now he ended up in a big problem. The reason God did not refrain him to go there is because he wanted him to mature, aging there. For 20 years, Jacob has been aging in the city of Haran. And now he is finally realizing that God has been with him. Now he is not perfect, but yet in the process of still aging and maturing, and at least understanding and acknowledging that it was God made him who he was. And I hope each one of us, we are at all different junctures of our own life. You may be still struggling. You may still looking for the path, directions. You may have job and then you're moving on and hoping to go somewhere. Or maybe like me, like I'm almost approaching 60 and thinking, as long as I stay healthy, I'm happy, right? We may be all at different places, but still same thing we need to acknowledge. Same thing. No matter what. Knowing that our God, Almighty God, without Him, we'll struggle more. Without Him, we may end up empty-handed. Without Him, we are nobody. Be able to acknowledge God as who He is, what He is doing. He may do a lot of things behind the curtain, so we don't even know about it. His hand is in and out of our life, but we cannot even see it. But our faith in God is to acknowledge that and be able to see what God is doing in our lives. Invisibly sometimes, most of the time. And that is the strength. And that is the reason Jacob went through this training camp, literally, in Haran, going through all that. And for him, 20 years, God allowed him to live. 20 years. I hope your training camp experience is shortened in life. So God will let you go freely, returning to your home and enjoy life. But it's still a journey. It's still a journey. And I think that is what we can learn from the life of Jacob. And hopefully this encourages us. Because Jacob literally entered into the village of Haran empty-handed, but came with 4 wives, 12 children, lots of flocks and sheep and all that stuff. And then that's a lot of life that God blessed him with, even though there was a lot of troubles and struggles. So that's the kind of life that God bless the people of God. So we certainly can expect that too, that kind of blessings, while we're expecting that we need to persevere in life. So let's pray. Yeah.